today we are here to talk about Nightfall. This is one of the AEG deck builders from years gone by.
Yep.
What year was it from specifically?
2011.
For the first one, but
right.
It lasted for a few years.
Yeah, there's subsequent expansions, but I think 2017 maybe was the last year. Okay, I'd have to double check. Double check, but 2011 is when it first came out.
Yeah, we've got all of the sets, and we had it mixed together. So they, some of these are from the other sets, but Nightfall, there was
Martial Law.
Yeah, Martial Law. There's the Eastern Skies. I think there was 2 or 3 other expansions in there.
A couple small box. There's a couple. Most of them were big box expansions.
Yeah,
but there's a couple small. Martial Law was a small box.
Okay. So before we get into the detail, though, hit that subscribe button. Come
Absolutely.
on, join along. We got lots and lots of games to go through.
We got a few more.
Yeah. Like what? 2,500, 2,600, something
like 2,700.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. So yeah.
So if you want to see all these exciting games from years gone by, or today, or coming out soon,
subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when we get this stuff out.
Yep. All right. So what's the details on this?
So again, came out in 2011. The Board Game Geek rating is 6.5. It plays 2 to 5. Designers David Gregg. There's quite a few artists involved, which is pretty common with deck builders because of all the different art. Conceptopolis, Thomas Deeney, Andrew Hepworth, Daniel Vendrell Oduber, and Florian Stitz. And again, as Randy said, it's published by AEG, out of print, but I found copies that range anywhere between $34.95 on eBay to $14 on Board Game Geek.
Okay. So this is pretty much strictly a deck builder, so you're only getting cards.
Yeah, but as far as the deck builder goes, I think it's one of the more complicated deck builders I've ever played.
Yeah, the card stock is not great.
I would say I felt it. I think it's about equivalent to a Magic the Gathering card.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's no texture.
There's no texture, but it feels about the same thickness.
Okay. But, yeah, these take up a lot of sleeves. There's a lot of cards.
But as much as you shovel this game like any other deck builder, it's highly recommended, especially if you plan on playing it a lot.
Yeah, and there is a big deck that's just the draft cards to choose the decks that you play with. So there's a ton of decks in this game. So as far as quality of components,
it's just straight cards.
It's just cards. I think it's a 6 as far as
I mean, if it would have came with sleeves, maybe it would have upped it a little bit. But since it didn't, and you have to spend that much more money on sleeves.
If it came with that sleeves, it's not going to be 35, 15
well,
bucks.
not anymore, but I mean, even then, but still, yeah. So I can't go any higher than a 6.
Okay, so moving on to theme. This is werewolves and vampires.
Right.
There's also some ghouls mixed in and some
vampire
humans.
hunters.
But it's pretty much werewolves versus vampires for the most part. I'm not a big fan of any of that theme. I don't like vampires. I'm not a big fan of werewolves, but I like how they combined it in this game. It's actually kind of cool. Got kind of some biker feel for some of them, and
probably. And I could see you probably liking it because it's not gory. If it was gory, you'd probably like it a lot less. Yeah,
and I like the mechanism, which we'll get to when we talk about gameplay of how it works. So, as far as theme, I mean, it's layered on completely. There's no reason it should be.
It could be. Anything.
But the actions of the cards do take advantage of the different factions, whether it be werewolves or ghouls or vampires.
I mean, thematically, I guess if you go into some of the flavor text on the cards, it might. There's not a whole lot.
No.
There really isn't. It's more just the artwork is really nice.
Yeah, I do like the artwork. It is pretty cool artwork.
That's really about it on theme, is the art.
Yeah, given the fact that art is in this category, I think I'll give it a 7 because the art is so darn good.
It is really good. I'm maybe 6.5 because the art is so good. Mm-hmm. But again, it is layered, so it could be anything mechanically. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really give you a horror vibe. But the mechanics for gameplay, that's where it's going to shine. So thematically, 6.5.
So moving on to Rulebook. So one of the things that I liked about AEG went back in the day, I'm not a big fan of them right now, but back in the day, AEG, one of the things they always did with their deck builders, Thunderstone, Nightfall, both did this, is every time they released a new version of the game, they always had an integrated version upgrade for the manual. So it always had the current version with the current game back with all the old games.
So you didn't have to have all the manuals out to learn the game.
Legendary. Yeah. So I wish AEG had not backed out of the whole deck building games for the most part.
Or at least if other companies would learn a really good lesson.
Yeah. Now they didn't do the nice dividers like they did in Smash Up.
Right.
So
this is before they did those nice dividers in Smash Up.
This is before that.
Yeah. So I mean, those nice dividers was the big geeky box is when that started.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it'd have been nice if they did that. But at least their dividers are still labeled.
But they stopped doing the rule books with Smash Up. They didn't have an integrated rule book when they released new expansions for the Smash Up.
Except for Big Geeky Box.
Big Geeky Box, yes. That's the only one. But, that they did it with every release on these old ones.
But, I mean, as far as the dividers, at least they still, even then, they did the dividers right.
Yes.
I mean, clearly labeled, knew exactly where stuff went. Legendary, please, Upper Deck, please learn that.
Yes. So they did definitely have the upper hand on Upper Deck.
Golly.
So... Yeah, I think the rule book, it's complex read, but the game is kind of complex. I don't think you can make it any easier. It's 36 pages front to back, but a lot of that is indexes and reference
to the cards.
Yeah, this is practically almost like a Magic or a versus difficulty as far as how the things work within the cards. But you're not having to build the deck up front like one of those. But the way the mechanics of the cards work is very
pretty
similar.
Complicated.
And it's more complicated than your typical deck builder.
Absolutely.
This is no Dominion, that's for sure. So, this is targeted more to the heavier Magic crowd, I believe. It's a shame it didn't go over better than it did. I mean, for a while it was kind of hot.
Yeah, it was kind of hot for a while. I mean, it was out for a few years, so that's better than a lot of games.
That's true. So I think I'm going to give the rulebook probably a 7.5 based upon the material it had to convey, and it does have some good examples as far as how it works.
Right.
It's sectioned nicely, and I like the fact that they integrated the previous rules, and that's why I think I'm giving it that.
I'll run with that. I do have the base game, and I have martial law, but as we'll talk about in gameplay, I don't play it that often, and so I don't really remember the rule book a whole lot. So
yeah. All right. So moving on to gameplay, this is where things get complex because you get a starter deck of cards, and there's 6 different suits in it, if you will. There's purple, gray, yellow, red, blue, and green. This is definitely not a game for colorblind. Issues.
It is not. Yeah, you would be in a lot of trouble if you are.
Because you need to know the colors, and they just have the same shape, all circles.
Yeah, they're all moons.
What's unique about this is there's a chaining system done, which is similar to what happens with a Magic or what have you.
Not really.
Not really?
Not really. Not with chaining, no.
Okay.
I mean, there's comboing.
Yeah.
So if you consider it like a combo, then yeah. But the way the mechanic of the chaining works, it's pretty unique. I mean, I haven't seen... I think there's some games that came out after that's kind of took some inspiration from this. But I think this is one of the first ones I remember that really had such a unique chaining ability for playing this card that would then allow you to play this card.
Yeah, so each of the starter cards only chains to its own color.
Right.
But as you develop your deck, you're going to get ones that have 2 colors that chain from a single color. So the way the cards are applied at the beginning of the game is there's 6 decks dealt in the center, or actually it's 8 minus the number of players.
Right.
If you're playing 2 players, it's 6 plus the 2 that you're going to add. If it's 3 player, then you have 5 in the middle and you'll add 3. Then you're going to draft from a set of cards, and it depends on how many of the sets you're playing with, how many cards you're going to draft from. We played with 8 cards to choose from, and that's mainly to avoid situations where you get a card that doesn't chain with anything because it doesn't mesh. So we played with 8. You draft one set for your own private collection, which is another unique aspect of this game.
Yep.
You have your own 2 sets
that only
of cards.
You can buy from.
Well, there are cards that have been that way.
Right,
but in
for
general,
the most part.
In general, you can buy from your private decks. And then you're going to draft one, you're going to pass to your opponent. Your opponent's going to then choose one from their set and pass to you. they're going to choose one from the second set. So you're each going to choose one from each other's decks if you're playing with 2 players. Then you're going to get your deck back, and you're going to choose one to add to the central tableau that everyone can buy.
Right.
And then after that, there'll be 8 in the center and 2 of your private for every player. From that point forward, you determine a first player, and you're going to get a hand of 5 cards out of a deck of your starter of 12. You're going to then use those cards. First thing, if you have any cards in play already, they would attack. But in the first round, you wouldn't have any in play. But any cards that are in play, attack first. That's the first thing that happens. And on the cards, there's a stat in red in the upper corner that is your attack ability. So it will attack and hit any monsters that are in play. Some will let you bypass the monsters and go directly and attack the person. This is a game similar to Versus or Magic, where the goal is to take out the
other player.
And this one, it's based upon adding wounds to their hands.
Yeah.
There's a deck of 30 common wounds, and then there's excess wounds if you should go over by far. But once that's the clock for the game as well. Once 30 wounds are inflicted, the game will end.
And whoever has the most wounds loses.
Right. Well, whoever's the fewest wins, because if it was more than 2 players, it would
right.
So you're going to attack, and there's a defense around the perimeter of the board, and this is kind of neat too. Some of these have, like this guy has 3 defense in his main position. So you can take a hit and rotate it to show he took a hit for you. And you can defend up to you get to the 3 hits, and then he's removed from the play. And when your starters get killed off, they're eliminated from the game.
You don't get them back.
And that's a good thing, because it takes away these ones that can
which is another unique part about the game, because most deck builders, you have to have some kind of mechanic to help you eliminate the cards out of your deck. This does it automatically.
Yeah,
which is kind of nice. Yeah, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Now you have to build up some cards to hopefully get rid of wounds, but
yeah, getting rid of wounds is a little tougher. You get 2 starting cards that let you trash wounds, which are nice.
But you get to use it that one time, because then they're gone.
Yeah, then once you play them, they're gone, so you only get to get rid of 2 wounds with them. So you want to keep those for when you need to play and to get rid of wounds, which means you have to have the wounds in your discard pile. Each one of these cards has a special ability when you're chaining them. So in the chain, these starters are hard to chain because they don't, like I said, they can only chain one color. But when you get these other cards in play, they start with a single main color, which it chains from, and they have 2 dots that have different colors that will let you chain onto. So you can play this and then play another one of those 2 smaller certain colors, and then keep chaining as long as you have cards that fit together. So getting cards into the tableau and into your private that have combinations of colors is really key to this game.
And the other part is that you can then chain off of your opponent.
Yes.
So that's as important as chaining off your own play.
Yes. So there's times where you'll play your entire hand before your turn ever comes to you, because you'll play on somebody else's. And you got to look at the abilities of the cards, because sometimes the abilities of the cards will affect you when it's your chain versus when it's on other players' chains. So you don't want to necessarily play your cards on other players' chains all the time. And then sometimes there's ones you really absolutely do want to play on other players. But you got to be careful, because you can screw yourself in this game. Because
absolutely.
If you play a card that says inflict wounds on cards that are in play, and your opponent doesn't have any cards in play yet, because the chain goes from the bottom up when it resolves. So the cards, if I was chaining on Robert's plays, mine would go off before Robert's from the bottom up. So if I play my cards, I get one of my characters in play, and the next card does inflict wounds on one of your characters.
I don't have anything in play yet.
You don't have anything in play. I have to inflict wounds on something.
Right.
So it inflicts on my own character. Bad idea.
I did that.
Yeah, I did it too.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you've got to be careful, because sometimes you need that connector card and to get your chain to flow right. But it's really a neat system they got. And
it's really neat. I unfortunately can't wrap my brain around it. I love the idea of it, and I was chaining just fine, but Randy is much better at the techniques of being able to chain it and deal damage. And then that's how you win the game. And I wasn't able to defend well enough and then attack back. Did a little bit, but not well enough to win. And I never have. We played this quite a few times a few years ago.
Yeah.
Played it quite a bit. I never could win again.
There used
It's
to be
fun.
an app on the iOS that played this game, and
the pre 64-bit days where you could play a lot.
I was so bummed when this went away. It seems like all the apps are going away now. They're going towards this Tabletopia and Board Game Arena and all that, which I don't like.
I like them, but I like my iOS apps too, and they're slowly going away.
So the other thing is that you've got two types of cards. You've got the creature cards, which will go into play, and they act as your defense and attack. And then you have the action cards, which typically trigger in the chain. So you're going to have them as you go through the chain. They're going to affect the chain in some way, or attack other players for wounds during the chain. So they'll have an ability that says chain or your chain, or they'll have some kind of ability on there. And then the other thing that's unique about this, and this is my favorite part of this, is the colors will sometimes have a kicker that triggers from it. So the cards that when you buy them all have a kicker color that if the card that it chains onto, if its main dominant color at the top matches the kicker color, then it triggers a special ability on the card. So you can get some awesome abilities in addition to your main ability of the card by triggering those kickers. And it really makes a nice system of how it works. It's really,
if you can get it to work, it's really satisfying.
Oh yeah,
it feels great. I don't get to do it very often, but when I did do it, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and then I had a perfect chain that was going to play all 5 of my cards, and every one was going to trigger a kicker. But the one card in the middle of that chain said you can't play any vampire cards, and my cards later were vampire ones. So I had to rearrange my deck. I still was able to play all 5 of them because I put my werewolves before that card. But none of my I think I got 1 kicker to trigger instead of all 5. So it was kind of disappointing. So I kind of screwed myself that way again. But I really love the dynamics of this game. I wish it was still in print. I wish it was something that was still ongoing. I wish it wasn't werewolf and vampire theme.
Well, right, or maybe just a re-implementation, maybe a sci-fi game or something.
Well, it could be gangster. I think gangster would fit well because it's almost gangster with what you got. Because like
like a 1920s crime noir or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, you could have rival gangs instead of the vampires and werewolves, and and they almost have that with the vampires and werewolves.
They kind of do.
A lot of like the vampires look like they're gang members versus vampires, and the werewolves is a little harder to disguise them, but. Even with what it is, I don't mind the werewolf and vampire in this so much.
Sure.
There's no sparkly vampires, I don't think. Yeah. So I really enjoy this mechanic. I as far as deck builders go, this is one of my top 3, I think. I'm probably going to give this one, I think, an 8.5 is where I'm at with it. As far as the complexity of it, if you don't mind heavy complexity games as far as deck builders, because this is definitely not your Dominions.
It is not.
This is not. I think Thunderstone's even lighter as far as
I think
mechanics.
So too.
Thunderstone's probably between the two as far as Dominion is definitely the most basic. I would say this is probably a medium to heavy as far as deck builders go.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Aeon's End might give a run for it.
Yeah, I haven't played that one yet.
Which is, I prefer it over this one. And it's also got some great unique elements to it too. But I won't go as high just because I do have such a hard time making it work for me. I don't want to take it away from the game itself. The game itself is great, very unique, very cool. But for me personally, my subjective opinion of it, I'm gonna go 7.5. I just wish that I just wish it was a little bit easier for me to be able to make it click and be able to do those cool combos and stuff like that.
Yeah, and sometimes it can fall in a situation where when you place the main tableau out, you just don't have good chaining cards. That can happen.
Yeah.
And if so, it kind of sucks. So you definitely want to get ones where you see a different colors in the combos. I've had it play where like every one of them had like a yellow or like the top cards. Like, well, I'm not going to chain anything because every one of them has a yellow.
And there's no yellow.
So yeah, it kind of stinks when that scenario plays out, but it's very rare.
Right.
And you can mitigate it with the 2 decks you get to draft for your
True.
personals, because you get to choose those. So yeah, it's possible to get that situation and still make change, but you'll be depending a lot on your personal decks. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really awesome awesomely designed game.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not your cup of tea, it is definitely well made.
Yeah, even though it doesn't click for me, I still play it anytime. It's still a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, well, that's our assessment of Nightfall. So if you enjoy these heavier deck builders and you didn't hear about this one back when it was out,
try it out.
Check it out.
Like I said, it's relatively cheap.
Yeah, you can find it still. It's still available out there in different places. I know some places bought a lot of inventory and they just still have it in their stock, and they usually are selling it cheap. I've seen it recently for very discounted prices. So and you can buy, like, if you can't find the base Nightfall, like all of the big sets were independent. They have starters in there, so you can play with just that set. So it's not something you have to, oh, well, I can't play because it's just an expansion. As long as you buy one of the box set ones, it will have all the starter cards in it. So, all right. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.